Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change with Mike Horn podcast. I am absolutely delighted and looking forward to flourishing during our conversation today with our virtual studio guest, Dr. Toby Travis. Toby is one of those individuals, the more you engage with him, the more you talk with him, you'll learn why perhaps he is the trusted advisor. And it's in a way, he is an educator in a pedagogical tradition. But beyond that, I think an educator for life and for leadership. And again, let me just say a few more words about Dr. Toby Travis, the founder of Trusted, which is this framework for school improvement focused on developing trusted leaders. And boy, aren't we surely in need of leadership in our educational systems. His research led as the basis for Trusted School Leader 360 assessment, which schools worldwide utilize to inform school improvement initiatives. In addition, he's an executive consultant with the Global School Consulting Group, an adjunct professor for the International Graduate Program of Educators for the State University of New York College at Buffalo, and an experienced teacher and administrator of primary through 12 schools, K through 12 schools. Maybe that's how I think about that. And of course, his work, in much of it in relationship to the book, has been featured in Forbes, CEO World Magazine, eSchool News, Authority Magazine, and more, including NPR. While Dr. Travis today helps businesses, organizations, and schools reach mission fulfillment and well-being, I also want to congratulate him on a new role, which I'm going to let him talk about in just a little bit. So, Toby, with all of that a wonderful blend of life that you bring, why don't you say a few words about yourself to our audience?
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. And, it's always a little daunting to hear accolades, read or given. It's like when I speak at an event, I often ask them, please keep it short, the intro, because then you have less to live up to. But really, all the things you've mentioned, it's just been an honor and a blessing to have great connections. There's just everything that you mentioned, that there's a story behind it that we could talk about, where I've just been very, very fortunate. And it's not false humility. I think, I know what I know, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But I've also been really blessed with a network of professionals, both in education and business and the nonprofit sector, that have influenced my life and practice. And then it's been a joy and a privilege to pass it on to others. And probably the only other thing that I would mention that wasn't in that lead up is, one of my real joys and passion is that of mentoring. And so I have been and continue to actively mentor others, as I have been mentored and continue to be mentored as well. I'm a big proponent of just continual learning, continual mentorship and menteeship, if you will. You're never too old to be learning from others. And one of the real philosophies of personal and professional growth that I have embraced and discovered is you learn most by doing. And so when you are helping others, you're helping yourself. You become better at what you do and who you are as you pour into others and help them. So there you go. That's kind of Toby in a nutshell.
No,
Thanks for the opportunity.
That's wonderful, Toby Travis. And a lot of other people think that you're great as well. Your book, Trusted, The Bridge to School Improvement, was nominated, was named as Book of the Month and nominated for Book of the Year by the Magic Pen in 2021. And one of the things that you write in the book is you write that trust is the single greatest indicator of successful leadership. And our audience, many are engaged in the pursuit of authentic leadership. My most recent book was Living in Integrity by Design, Living and Working Authentically. And at the core of authentic leadership is trust between and among people. It's hard to make any progress without a foundation of trust. So how do you think about that? What have been the observations, Toby, that led you to that conclusion?
Well, I'd go beyond hard, Mike. I would say it's impossible. And we've got just boatloads of research across industries. Now, obviously, my book focused in on the education sector because that's the world that I primarily live and work in. And I think the reason the book has resonated with so many is because the principles are universal. And it doesn't take much research to discover that we have known this actually for decades, that without a high level of trust in those who are in leadership positions, organizations do not experience the kind of growth or success that they desire, or well-being. I always like to talk about that too, because a lot of folks will invest a lot more of themselves in an organization if they like going to work. If it's a pleasant experience. It's not always about the money. Now we do know there's been some studies on what's called contingent rewards, and that the number one contingent reward is money, and there's no apologies for that. But you also will experience many people will stay and work for an organization, a school, a company, far longer and a far deeper investment than what the paycheck is returning for them, because they like it, they believe in it, they like the people they're working for, and it just drives improvement around the organization in so many ways. So anyway, all that to say, that quote that you're lifting there really is just that is decades of research, not just mine, but many, many others, boiled down to a single observation or conclusion from decades of research across multiple sectors. The number one indicator of successful schools, organizations, businesses is trusted leadership. And what's really interesting about the research, Mike, is it doesn't seem to matter how we measure success in that formula. So if I may, in an education sector, if I say, well, success is measured by the retention of quality faculty and staff, direct correlation to trusted leaders. Success is being measured by high academic achievement levels of students, direct correlation to trusted leadership, and on it goes.
And let's think about trust at the institutional level or at the organizational level, as opposed to what happens interpersonally. Like many other segments of the economy, the education sector has seen a talent loss, particularly among young educators who have spent 5 or 6 or 7 years teaching. With so many events over the last several years, it caused many of them to stay in education, but to stay in education in different sort of ventures. Can you talk about maybe how the big quit or the great resignation in education affects trust at this institutional level of how we think about our institutions in society?
Sure. And again, it is very much like any organization. Your greatest asset is your human resources. So if you don't have quality people, and what I mean by quality is well-trained experts in their field, and yet personable, they've got the skill sets to be successful in their role, it's going to affect the level of trust. And the great resignation, as we're seeing it in the education sector, actually is nothing new. The pandemic just exacerbated the problem. We've been seeing this trending for many years. Colleges with education programs are graduating fewer and fewer students. That's been going on for years. There has been a vacancy level for school administrators, such as myself, for many years. And last year, I saw a stat where 30% of public school superintendents intended to not renew their contracts. I mean, the numbers are just crazy. And as you know, in the public sector, many school systems had to open this year with literally hundreds of vacancies, scrambling to cover it. I mean, it's beyond their control because there's so many factors to it. But obviously, this is going to impact the quality of the educational services provided to those students. Parents, rightly so, feeling, hey, I paid my taxes, or if they're in the private sector, I paid my tuition. Although the private sector, interesting enough, has actually seen quite a bump and growth. We didn't expect that at the beginning of the pandemic. It's been interesting to watch how that's happened, how this has actually been probably a very positive thing for the private sector, and where you see enrollment bumps. Many were questioning, is this going to be just a COVID bump? Hard still to know how long lasting this is going to be. And I guess maybe to wrap up an observation around all of this is, to me, I think it's an opportunity. Often opportunities come to us through problems. And we have recognized, both the public and private education sectors, a need for reformation of the educational system, especially here in the United States, for many, many years, but have been unable to make the hard decisions to move schools to a better place that is more about learning and supporting quality staff so that they have longevity. I think in the end, we are going to see a lot of really good things come out of a very challenging and dark time.
Yes, that's great. We have to think in terms of possibilities and how we acknowledge the past, transition successfully, and begin to build new orders. And in that regard, you use talking about connections, you use a suspension bridge analogy to explain the roles and functions of trusted leadership. Can you say some more about that and perhaps the 6 trusted leadership components?
Well, I always give my wife credit because I had finished my doctoral dissertation a few years back and tried to figure out, okay, how do you wrap this all into something that people can understand? And we know people are, we're all visual learners. And so we were talking at the dinner table one night. I'm like, well, how do I encapsulate this all in something people can visualize? She goes, well, isn't it really just like a bridge? You've got to have all the parts working together or they're not trusted. And I'm like, you're right. And actually, I jumped into about 3 months of reading everything I could read about bridge construction, and just found that there are at least, and architects would tell me there's probably more, but there are at least 6 essential components to a suspension bridge, 7 if you count the cables, that must be in place. They must be working together. And so we use that metaphor then, or I use the metaphor and then taking the research and applying, okay, what does that look like in leadership? And I won't go through all 6, Mike, but as an example, the foundation of trust, it's like the foundation of a bridge. In trust, it's all about beliefs and values. So when we look at leaders that we trust, these are leaders that have very well articulated beliefs and values about who they are, about their organization, about how they're going to do business. And that's their foundation. So just like a trusted bridge has got to have a solid foundation, you know what it is. There's no waving. It is there and it is solid. Well, the same thing in leadership. We've got to know what we believe and what we believe about. A bridge then has a substructure, and the whole function of the substructure of the bridge is to connect and support everything to the foundation. Well, in leadership, that substructure is about connecting and supporting everything we do to who we say we are and what we believe. And actually, Mike, this is where in my work with mentoring others or consulting with schools and organizations is where I most frequently see trust is broken. Is they say they're one thing, they believe these values, And yet, when you look at their employee handbook or you look at their policies and their procedures, they do not align with who they say they are and what they believe. And so that's the substructure of leadership, is making sure we're supporting and connecting everything we say, we do, our product, if you will, to who we say we are and what we believe. And when that holds together, now trust is there. And on it goes. The deck component is the part of the bridge that you drive across. You got clear lanes, clear lines, good markings. You know what lane you're supposed to be in. There's no potholes. It's smooth. Well, to me, there's all kinds of analogies there about communication, about vision casting, clarity of direction. Trusted leaders know where they're going. They know how to articulate it in a simple and clear way so people know where they're going. They got clear mile markers, if you will, to indicate their progress. Again, it's a component of leadership that must be in place. And so you have these, and I would just look at the book, but you have these 6 components working together. And here's the challenge. If one of them is not in place, trust is lost. So think about it with a bridge. If I'm going across this bridge, but the bearings of a suspension bridge, the bearings are the part that move, they counterbalance for weight and structure. If the bearings are not in place, if there's not flexibility, what happens? That bridge will actually collapse. And so, again, all these pieces need to be working together. And so that illustration is what kind of carries through the research that's shared in the book, as well as very specific actions then of how to assess it, and then what to do to address areas for improvement and ensure that all those components are working together for high levels of trust.
Trust as the way to make a bridge to school improvement. As I think about that suspension bridge analogy, and I relate it to integrity. And integrity is just that. Perhaps if I were a structural engineer, coming back to the topic of bridges and design and engineering, I would say that a person who has integrity is somebody where it all hangs together right, that it all fits. Others express integrity as being genuine, being the real deal, of whole cloth. I mean, those are expressions that are familiar to us. And I wonder if in some ways, as we think and talk about integrity, is it another word for trust? And, as a writer, as a speaker, as a contributor on the topic of authenticity, and someone who seeks to advance authentic leadership in the business world, I think about authenticity as a synonym for congruency. That, my words and actions match, and even better, if I can get my thoughts, words, and actions to match. I mean, that's a type of congruency, and that relates again to trust and to the use of self and agencies and your underlying values. And yet, we know there can be authentic jerks in the world as well. But it is important to, I think, in that regard, understand your values, and certainly, in that regard. Trained as a scholar, practitioner in organization behavior, I think about a set of humanistic values, treating others with respect, treating others with dignity, recognizing that everyone is in a process of development somewhere along the line. And I wonder for you, what are some of the values that resonate, that lead to, the bridge that you build? What are those values?
Well, actually, one of those values is even the idea that everyone has value.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, in the world, excuse me. Unfortunately, in the world that we live in today, there is so much polarization of ideas, and we could look at, and it's not just the political world; it's everywhere, and it seems like we have lost the value of collaboration. We've lost the value of compromise, and we talk a lot about empathy, but I don't see a lot of true tolerance unless people are holding to similar ideals. And yet those are all indicators of someone who is a good leader. They understand everyone has value, no matter. And I liked what you just said, Mike. They're all on a journey. We're all on a journey. We are all developing and becoming what we can be. And especially if we're intentional about that, that growth is possible at any age, at any stage. And as leaders, understanding that those that we have in our care, that they're all on a journey. We all have imperfections. And this is why I'm also really such a data hound, and I'm a believer in assess, plan, act, reassess. It's like, let's be transparent. I want to hear from my employees. How do you think I'm doing as a leader? Where can I improve? Identify very specific things to get better at, create a plan of action, work on it, do it, then reassess, and just keep that process going over and over and over again. And you model that process to others, and you see it. The growth in yourself also then boils over into growth into others. And so I'm not sure that totally addresses what you were asking, but
in many ways it relates to
that core value is we have value. Everyone has value, and understanding everyone's on a journey is an important value for leaders.
Yes, I think in many ways it reflects Jung's observations that you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. That is the trust and the authenticity and the integrity. And the privilege of a lifetime, he also said, is to become who you truly are.
Wow.
Perhaps the greatest of his observations was that we can't change anything until we accept it. Think about this lack of empathy, lack of collaboration. What prevents our civic discourse in that regard?
Well, I think part of it is an unwillingness to look in the mirror. To be reflective. I think what we're seeing is a culture that's not committed to self-reflection and humility. This idea of valuing others above self. We've been sold a bill of goods that you've got to exert yourself, you got to be independent, you got to fight for number one, and well, there are elements of that are certainly true in the right setting, but life is about relationships. We're on this planet as a community, and in our organizations or in our groups, whether we're talking about our family groups, our church group, our work group, wherever it is that we, the club, whatever your community is, life is about relationships. And what we find is when we are, as the word has been used so frequently now, when we are mindful of ourselves, we have that emotional intelligence to recognize our own weaknesses, our own susceptibilities, and then we can extend that to others. Wow. Then relationships get healthier and deeper. And again, organizationally, we see a lot more investment. There's been several major studies done on innovation. And it's interesting, it is in those organizations where employees feel that they can trust their leader to allow them to make mistakes. This is where we see the organizations with the highest levels of innovation. Because I know, I can take a risk. I can go after this. I can try to be creative in what I'm trying to do, and I'm not worried about losing my job or the relationship over it. This is where innovation flourishes. But again, I think it all begins with a willingness to look in the mirror, a willingness to self-assess and to let others assess where you are at, and then using that to intentionally develop a path forward for our own personal and professional development.
It's interesting. In my work now, I think less and less about culture and more about community. And it is the power of relationships in the community that form the unique properties. Our those who are near to us and our mentors often give us, I think, some of our springboards, our platforms. In your case, it was your wife with the suspension, with the idea of bridges, which led you on a journey. And we spoke briefly about our mentors and mentees, and I want to think about two of my mentors there, and several of my mentors in particular. But one mentor who was very helpful gave me an analogy like yours. It was to think about intersections. And he talked about traffic lights and the walk, don't walk signal, and who had the design for that. And what could be a belief if you believe that every intersection in life could be improved. And we think about our relationships, as perfect and in need of improvement. And yet, my mentors have also been the worst examples in my life because they're they all worked until they died, or they're still working now. So I am torn a little bit about this. What advice or guidance, Dr. Toby Travis, do you have to mentor talent in educational institutions, built on the principles of trusted?
Well, to get really practical, so right down to, and maybe even something, your listeners can take and use as an action point. So we create norms with the leadership teams that I mentor or the individuals that I'm mentoring, norms of practice in our leadership and how we're going to navigate life and work together. One of the norms that I implemented a number of years ago, really just as email and texting was really becoming, a predominant thing, recognized very early on, and this is not kudos to me, actually it was an observation of a friend of mine that I then jumped on, that how there's something about a text or an email where human beings will say things with their thumbs that they will never necessarily say with their mouths, and it distorts the conversation. And so I implemented, and this is actually going back about 10, 11 years ago now, the practice with my teams that we will never engage in a problem or an issue via electronic communication, with the exception of Zoom. I mean, that became, right? But as far as like, we're not going to, so if someone raises a grievance or a problem via email or text, our only response is going to be, thanks for sharing this with you. Sounds like we need to talk. But we will not engage about the problem via text or email. We will insist on a face-to-face or at least a ear-to-ear, a phone conversation. That practice alone, I have seen it transform workplaces. And I've seen it now written in grievance policies or problem-solving policies of the organizations that I work with, where we do not permit grievances to be submitted via text or email. Now, you can submit them in writing, but they will not be discussed in that manner. It must be dealt with in person. It has changed the work climate. And you see, when you value those face-to-face conversations, it is those types of norms or practices that can help increase trust.
Reinforces the idea that you can be closer to a work colleague who sits 6,000 miles away from you than a colleague who is 6 feet away from you, based on the element of conversation and discussion and engagement.
Right. And thankfully, we do have tools like what we're using right now. I mean, this has just changed how we do life. It gives us the ability to do this relationally and not just through, again, the electronic communication, which so often can be distorted, misunderstood. It's not nuanced. You can't read a facial expression. That is so much a part of what quality communication looks like. And trusted leaders value quality communication. And so that would be a part of, I say, would be the skill set in navigating problem solving as well as communication, is keep it as personal as possible. And yes, we need to be good writers. We need to know how to use social media, et cetera. But social media is not the platform for problem solving. And I know we've seen probably some studies that have come out on, the effectiveness of how people are, they promote their viewpoint or the political stance on a social media post. It almost has zero influence because there's no way that you can get to the meat of an issue in a post. Life and issues are just far too complex to be dealt with through the electronic media like that. Social media is great for sharing, pictures and kudos and celebrations, but to solve real problems, no, that takes people work.
And Toby, one of the ways that others can learn more about your work and about people work in general is probably to pick up a copy of Trusted, The Bridge to School Improvement. I assume that our audience can find it on Amazon.
Yes, the book's available on Amazon currently in Kindle and print. We're preparing a Spanish translation, which we hope to have available soon. So those who may have an interest in that, just kind of watch the site, and that'll come out, or connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll publish an announcement there when the Spanish version is available.
Oh, wow, that's great. So it sounds like the easiest way for our audience to learn more about these issues of trust, maybe told from the point of an educator, and educators are among our greatest influencers, aren't they? I mean, they certainly have been for me. So you bring this unique perspective and with principles that are universal and known for many years. And you can find all about this in Trusted, The Bridge to School Improvement. The ways to get in touch with Dr. Toby Travis are, one, to visit him at Amazon, where you can follow him and purchase his book, Trusted. And the other way to get in touch with Dr. Toby Travis is through LinkedIn, and to be in touch with him through there. Toby, I'll let you have the last words here before I say thank you, in terms of key messages that you would like for our audience to have, particularly as we think about the year ahead of us.
I think I would go back and share just one of the passions of my doctoral work, and then really the product of the book, is the importance of understanding that we need to assess our trust level. Trust is complex. It is not just one thing. As we talked about, integrity, consistency. There's actually many things. And in fact, research has shown there are at least 21 skill sets and competencies that trusted leaders possess. And especially as we look at leaders in the education sector, but it's true in every sector. So here's the challenge: is how do we know what to work on, and how to develop and ensure we've got high levels of trust in all components of what trusted leadership looks like? Well, we need to start by being, again, transparent, being willing to be assessed, look at the data, allow the data to drive our personal and professional improvement. And this is how we can ensure that we have a measurable way to increase our leadership skill sets, and then we see a direct connection and tie to the outcome that we desire for our organization or for our school. So again, it would just be realize that it is complex. It's not just an easy soft skill thing. There are many complexities to it, but it can be done. And this is what I hope is kind of the contribution, is our ability to assess, to plan, and intentionally see measurable growth in our leadership and the outcomes of our organizations.
Wonderful. It's been just such a delight and a privilege to be in conversation with Dr. Toby Travis, and thinking about trust and leadership and improvement in general. So again, think about picking up Dr. Toby Travis's book, Trusted, The Bridge to School Improvement, via Amazon, or be in touch with him by following him or contacting him via LinkedIn. Well, once again, to everyone in our audience, stay well until the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership, and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horn.com. Once again, Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.